So I only have 2 months to complete this highly detailed, impossibly sparkly unicorn gown from the game Shining Nikki, who's sponsoring this video and this cosplay. But with a dress like this, on a deadline like that, I'm a little scared. But let's look at the design. Shining Nikki is a next-gen dress-up game, so the outfits are intricate, but they are in gorgeously and terrifyingly detailed 3D. So the main piece is this very sparkly white cocktail dress with this massive, sheer, sparkly cape coming off the back, and this super detailed filigree piece right in the front. The design is actually from this year's Shining Nikki anniversary event called Reminiscence of Starstream. And Shining Nikki is more than just a dress-up game. It's got a really detailed story told in sort of a visual novel style. There's also this element of it that's like a reaction time game where you literally save the world through fashion. The game has as many facets as it has beautiful designs, and I think you'll really like it. And it's free to play, so check out the link in the description to download Shining Nikki today and play the 3rd year anniversary event. And while you're downloading it, I'm gonna start making the dress because I can't download the dress. I have to make it. So this dress is strapless, covered in sequins, has a gradient to it, and is semi-sheer in some parts. I've got a sequined fabric coming, but it's gonna need some structure. So the top layer of the dress is going to be 3 fabrics flat-lined together, and the bottom layer of the dress is going to be a separate structural layer of a structural fabric with boning and a built-in petticoat layer at the bottom of it. So I got a full pattern of the duck cloth cut out, and then I also cut out the same pattern, but not the skirt part, just the bodice part. That's gonna be the structural layer. I cut out a full pattern of voile, not voile, and I can't cut out the sequins yet because they're not here, but I did go ahead and make the little petticoat layer. This is actually the same pattern that I just did for Teto's petticoat, but it's like doubled up width-wise. And then to do the gradient, I took the duck cloth pieces and I dip dyed them. I did it on the duck layer because the fabrics going on top of it are sheer, so if I accidentally make the duck cloth too dark, then the other fabrics will lighten it. So now I've got all this stuff. This is gonna be the underlayer. This will eventually become the outside layer, but I'm gonna ignore all this stuff for now because we gotta get some structure. I'm telling you right now, if you ever try to make a strapless dress without boning channels and boning in it, you are going to show people your nipples. And I don't want to do that. So I've got the structural layer all laid out and I'm gonna get this sewn together. And you might be wondering, Sarah, why is that so many pieces? It's a relatively simple bodice. The way I developed this pattern was I took my Sakizo strawberry dress ball gown pattern that I made a year ago, I guess, and I reshaped it to be the appropriate shape for this bodice and then added an entire circle skirt to the bottom of it. So no, it doesn't need to be this many pieces, but this is how many pieces I made it, and I did do a mock-up and it seems to be working pretty well. Anyway, now that I've got these sewn together, we've got to add some boning channels. So I've got some double fold bias tape and I'm gonna cut myself a channel for every spot that I have a seam. If I had made my seam allowances a little bigger, I would be able to just use them, but I only gave myself 1/2 inch, and some of my seam allowances aren't super even. So I'm gonna be safe and add these. But all I need to do to install these is line them up with my seam, do a stitch on either side of the bias tape, and then do a stitch down the center of the bias tape, because that'll let me do double bones. But the great thing is, because I'm doing this on the lining layer, I don't actually need to worry about getting any of these lines super straight. I mean, they need to be even enough to where I can get the boning in them, but if they're a little squiggly, it doesn't matter because no one's ever going to see them. And I know it might seem a little tedious to do it this way, and you might be so tempted to go for that sew-in, like featherlight boning that you can get in Joann's, but that is the kind of boning that I would only recommend for things that, like, I don't know what I would recommend that boning for. Like, it's just better to make boning channels and put in proper boning because the risk of a strapless dress being annoying and falling down is just way too high. It's so worth it to actually take the steps to do real boning. Now I've got a bunch of little channels for all my bones to go in. And for the actual boning, though I know I just talked a lot of about that featherweight boning. For a bodice, you probably want to go plastic boning, but not all plastic boning is made the same. That featherweight boning is still not enough. I'd say you've got two good options for plastic boning. This stuff, the synthetic whalebone stuff, it is very nice. It is what I'm going to use for this. Your other option would be to make bigger boning channels and use the big old industrial size zip ties, the big fat ones. They don't have quite as much structural stability as the whalebone, so they work fine, but I like this stuff better, so I'm gonna use it. The biggest reason why I would recommend this over like spiral or flat seal boning is it's very easy to cut. It's easy to get filed down, and it's plastic, so you don't really have to put any tips on it. Whereas with like flat steel boning or spiral steel boning, you have to put tips on them, and if you don't, they will rip right through the boning channel. But I'm gonna go ahead and get all of my bones cut, and I'm not actually gonna put them in yet, because the next thing I wanna do is serge the very bottom of this, and then sew on that petticoat layer. But I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna get all my bones stuck in, and that will be my structural layer. Not me just now realizing how much my arms will show in this cosplay. No closure yet, but to show you how good the structure is. Look at that. Staying on with a single pin in the back. Anyway, this layer is done for now. It's not gonna get attached until I have completely finished the outside layer. So now I gotta start on that. This is cute though. Boned top with sheer skirt. Add that to the game, Shining Nikki. By the way, merch, bonfire, get some if you want some. Outside layer. These two piles of fabric need to become one pile of fabric. And the way I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna match each wall piece to each duck cloth piece, and I'm going to serge around the edges of every single piece. So the other thing is I don't have the sequin fabric yet, but I'm going ahead and doing this anyway because I am not going to run sequins through my serger. That would be stupid. The other thing is once I get all of these pieces serged together, I'm gonna do something a little fun to add some of that extra sparkle, that extra incredibly detailed dress-up game glitter detail. I'm gonna use some glitter spray on all of these pieces once they're flatlined. Just for some extra Shining Nikki sparkle. Because just like the beautifully detailed 3D dress-up models in the dress-up game Shining Nikki, we want this dress to be as beautiful and sparkly as the models in the game. So I'm gonna use glitter spray. Jump scare. My hair's different. Anyway, my sequins came and they are gorgeous, but sequins are kind of a weird fabric to work with. And while it looks like I have a ton of it, that cape in the back is gonna take up a ton of fabric. And the sequins are directional, so I have to cut everything out in a very specific way. So I'm not actually gonna be folding the fabric anywhere to cut two pieces at once. I'm actually gonna use the pieces that I already cut out as a pattern, so I can cut them out all individually to save on fabric. I'm also not using my fabric scissors to cut these because I have to cut through the actual sequins, and those would mess up my good scissors. So it sucks, but I have to use the craft scissors. But once those are all cut out, I can't actually flatline them yet, because there's some other stuff you need to know about sequin fabric. If you try to sew through a sequin, it might break your needle. So you're actually supposed to go through and cut away all of the sequins in your seam allowance. But my machine can actually sew through sequins, so I'm gonna be lazy. However, this fabric also has a bunch of beads in it, and my machine cannot sew through a glass bead. So I did have to go through and cut out every single bead in all of my seam allowances, which yeah, took forever, but at least now I have a bunch of silver beads for free. Kinda. But yeah, bead would absolutely break a needle, and we only want to break a needle on that like button. But with the seam allowance clear, I can actually start flatlining them to their corresponding pieces, which I'm gonna do with a long basting stitch on my machine. And really, do as I say, not as I do. Don't actually try to sew through sequins. You will probably break a needle. But with all of those flatlined, I can start assembling the dress. So I'm gonna get my side fronts sewn onto my fronts, my sides sewn onto my side fronts, the side backs sewn onto the sides, and then the back sewn onto the side backs, and I'm gonna leave the back open. Ooh! Eee! Break a needle on that leg button! That's not good. Do as I say, not as I do! Now, I have this. Oh my god, it's so sparkly. Okay, before I get the structural layer in, I actually need to take care of the little flounces. Here they are. They are just 2 pieces of the voile. But all I'm gonna do is baste them to the top of this layer so that it ends up sandwiched in between this one and the structural layer. Flounces are on, so now I'm gonna take my structural layer and it's gonna go right sides together with the outside layer. I'm gonna get that all pinned together and I'm gonna sew a seam all the way across the top and go down those back seams that I've left open. I did also have to go through and cut out all of the beads out of this part of the seam allowance too, but I also found that it is helpful to sort of feel where you're sewing with your fingers on the machine to make sure you didn't miss a bead, because the beads are really the beads are the thing that break needles. Okay. Oi! That's 2. Okay, so now I just gotta put this right sides out, and I'll need to press it, and I get this! Oh, this is really pretty. So next, this needs a closure, and I'm gonna do a back lacing closure because I like my waist tight. So a back lacing closure is gonna need bones of its own, but I'm gonna create the boning channels by top stitching the 2 bag-lined layers together. And all I'm gonna do is slide the bone up to the edge and then sew directly next to it with my adjustable zipper foot. Then I'm gonna leave a little gap for where the grommets are gonna go, and then I'm doing another boning channel on the other side the exact same way, just installing it with the adjustable zipper foot. Then I just gotta get my grommets in, which is easy for me because I have a grommet press. So I decided to do the hem by hand because it meant that I would not have to go through and cut out all of the beads from the hem. So all I did was double fold it and then go around with a whip stitch. But with that, the dress is done besides the filigree in the front, so I'm gonna move on to all of the accessories. And for the tights, y'all already know I'm a play sock god. But there's a twist this time, because the whole thing is power mesh. So I've got white power mesh for the main body of the sock, and my skin-toned power mesh for the top part of the sock. And I will now sing the Hokey Pokey Sock God song. You put your crotch seam in and you stop before the leg. You put your butt seam in and you also stop before you get to the leg. You make it go spread eagle, and yes, now you sew up the legs. And you turn it inside out and add a waistband. That's it. That's the tights. Let's move on to the pauldrons. So first of all, the pauldrons have all of these strung beads hanging off of them. So I had to make a bunch of those. I made some that are like fully strung beads, but then for most of them, I actually just hand-tied beads into fishing line. These ended up being kind of annoying because they get tangled, but I made a bunch of them. So now let's talk about the actual pauldrons. I basically made a really lazy junk pattern in Illustrator. I cut that out of EVA foam, cut a couple choice pieces of the filigree for dimension, dremeled all that out very lazily, primed it less than I should have, painted them silver, added more weathering than necessary to cover my sins. Honestly, please don't judge me for these. I was doing these at a time that I was going through something kind of sad, and I kind of just wanted the nostalgia trip of working with EVA foam like I did when I started cosplay, where I didn't really care about perfection. I was just trying to make some kind of cool armor piece. So these are not super impressive. When you're painting something silver, you really gotta go in with a lot of primer, or the silver's gonna show all of the imperfections. But these'll do. I think for how junky the pattern was, I'm actually pretty impressed that I was able to get that shape. Anyway, moving on to the filigree on the dress, I got a bunch of these filigree molds for like cake decorating, and I cast a whole bunch of tiny resin pieces out of these. I painted them silver, and then I also did sort of an outline of how this shape should look in Illustrator, and then I just hand sewed them all onto the dress. So the horn, I actually got a candle mold off of Etsy, and it's plastic, so I had to make sure I used some mold release. And for the attachment, I filled up the mold like 3/4 of the way, and then made this very strange looking little contraption. What's in there is a coupling nut that has been plugged up with hot glue and foam clay, and then the coupling nut will correspond to a bolt that will be able to be bolted into the wig so that I don't have to wear a headband or anything. But with that, for the headpiece, I did this really quickly, so the horn is on there, and then there's a couple extra little pieces of filigree that are hot glued onto it, and then I have a couple more little pieces of strung beads hanging off of it. Got that all situated on the wig, which, yes, I did cut the wig a little too short, but wigs don't grow back. Anyway, with that, my exquisitely designed Shining Nikki Ad Lumen cosplay was done. And this is so sparkly. I don't think I've ever made something this sparkly. And like, the designs in Shining Nikki are so detailed that I really didn't think I would be able to do this design justice in the time limit that I had. And yeah, it's not perfect. Those pauldrons are a little weird, but getting that sequined fabric saved so much time and made everything look so pretty that I do think this looks like it belongs in the next gen dress up game, Shining Nikki. Though I do kind of wish I was a horse girl and I knew a horse and I could go take pictures of the horse, but I don't think I've ever been like 2 feet from a horse, so that's not happening anyway. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to use that link in the description to download Shining Nikki for free and make all your fashion dreams come true. With thousands of exquisitely designed costumes, you might even find one you want to cosplay yourself. And if you want to support the channel directly, you can check out my Patreon, where you'll get some exclusive content. But if you're just watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, sending the video to a friend or your mom, or subscribing, then you're supporting, or downloading Shining Nikki, then you're supporting the channel too, so thank you. Bye!